A lot of dramatic questions have been circulating around Buckingham Palace lately. Some commentators are even asking whether the palace or Prince William allowed a situation to develop that would put Prince Harry and Meghan under heavier scrutiny. Others in more heated corners of the debate have gone as far as demanding that Parliament step in and strip titles altogether. That is the temperature of the conversation right now. It is intense, emotional, and full of competing narratives. At the center of it all is a wave of speculation about Harry and Meghan's children and the circumstances surrounding their births. Online, some of the claims have become so extreme that they no longer sound like ordinary royal gossip. There are people saying the children are being hidden, people questioning whether old photos are authentic, and people insisting that records should be released to settle everything once and for all. To be clear, those are allegations and rumors, not established facts. But what makes the story notable is that these conversations, once limited to fringe discussion, are now being repeated much more widely. For a long time, Meghan appeared to move through royal controversy on her own terms. Public statements were polished, photos were carefully presented. So, interviews were released in ways that kept attention focused exactly where she and Harry seemed to want it. From the outside, it looked as if they had found a way to tell their story without being boxed in by royal tradition. It gave the impression that the old rules could be softened, or at least managed through modern media. But this is where things become more interesting. The tone around the issue appears to have changed. Some reports and commentators now claim that pressure is building on the palace to look more carefully at Archie and Lilibet's place in the line of succession unless clear proof exists that every constitutional requirement was met. Again, that does not mean any wrongdoing has been proven. It means the discussion has shifted from gossip about personalities to questions about procedure, and that distinction matters. Royal lineage is not usually treated as a matter of branding, public affection, or online support. It rests on formal systems, official records, and long-standing rules. In that world, details are not supposed to be flexible. Documentation matters, process matters, precedent matters. So when people begin saying that records, announcements, or timelines do not look exactly the way they expected, the story naturally takes on a heavier tone. Supporters of Meghan would say much of this is unfair and fueled by bias. Critics would argue that the couple brought extra suspicion on themselves by trying to control every aspect of the narrative, while also stepping away from the usual royal structure. Both sides are framing the same events in very different ways. And somewhere in the middle sits the institution itself, which is often less concerned with emotion than with whether every box was properly checked. That is why the latest claims feel bigger than the usual royal back and forth. Some royal commentators now say palace staff may have quietly revisited materials connected to the children's births, their christenings, and the way everything fits with royal protocol. There is no public confirmation that such a review is taking place in the dramatic way some people describe it. But if any internal review does exist, even at a routine level, it would carry more significance than another round of tabloid chatter. From a neutral perspective, the story is no longer just about how Harry and Meghan present themselves. It is about whether official systems can support every part of that presentation. That is where the pressure comes from. Social media can amplify a narrative. Interviews can redirect attention. Beautiful family photos can soften public opinion. But none of that replaces official process. Critics have spent years pointing to moments they believed were unusual. They mention timelines that seemed unclear to them. They talk about records they say were incomplete or confusing. Some claim palace staff were overly restricted during Meghan's pregnancies. Others complain that the public never got the kinds of post-birth images and confirmations they had come to expect from previous senior royals. None of those things, on their own, proves anything improper. But each one has been used to keep the speculation alive. And when speculation survives for that long, it eventually starts affecting perception. Even people who do not fully believe the rumors begin to ask why the same questions keep resurfacing. Why are certain doubts so persistent? Why do some details keep getting revisited? Why do critics insist that what should be simple has become strangely complicated? Part of the answer may be that Meghan and Harry handled family milestones in a way that felt more private, more modern, and more controlled than the royal public was used to. Meghan, in particular, seemed determined to shape her own identity rather than disappear into tradition. That approach worked for many people who admired her independence. But for others, it created a sense that she was trying to rewrite rules that are usually treated as fixed. So now the atmosphere feels different. What once looked like a media battle is being talked about as a question of institutional order. That is a serious shift, because once the discussion moves from headlines to records, from emotion to procedure, the whole situation takes on a different weight. Whether the rumors are ultimately validated, disproven, or simply left unresolved, the reason they are getting renewed attention is the same. In royal matters, what can be documented always matters more than what can be dramatically argued. Part 2. The discussion heated up again after Meghan shared what looked like a simple family moment with Archie outside the couple's home in Montecito. On the surface, it seemed harmless enough, just another personal image offered to the public. But instead of calming the speculation, it appears to have revived it. That has become a familiar pattern. Every time new images involving the children are released, critics begin examining them closely, and old suspicions return to the spotlight. Some observers say the issue is not the photos themselves, but the reaction they trigger. People start comparing past appearances, revisiting earlier claims, and questioning whether official records line up with the public story. There is now a growing group of royal watchers who keep returning to the same basic argument. If everything followed normal royal procedure, why have so many details been debated for so long? That question, fair or not, is part of why some reports suggest palace staff may have reviewed internal materials again. Commentators speak about press releases, medical wording, baptism information, and the formatting of official notices as if they are puzzle pieces in a larger institutional check. From a neutral standpoint, that kind of review would not necessarily mean scandal. It could simply reflect the monarchy's habit of ensuring that records are complete and consistent. But in the current climate, even routine scrutiny is being interpreted as something deeper. One point that has drawn repeated attention is the way Archie's documentation was reportedly handled. According to widely discussed accounts, his birth record originally used Meghan's legal name, Rachel Meghan Markle, which would not have been unusual at all. Later, however, the wording was changed so that her name appeared in a more formal royal style. That change became a major talking point. Now, by itself, an amendment to a record does not prove deception. Records are sometimes updated for administrative reasons. But critics argue that the royal system is normally so exact that any retroactive change invites scrutiny, especially when it involves something as sensitive as birth documentation. The problem, as they see it, is not simply that the change happened. It is that the public never received a fully convincing explanation for why it happened. Two versions of the story have circulated. In one version, palace officials made the adjustment without Meghan's direct approval. In the other, Meghan wanted the change because it better reflected her royal position at the time. Both explanations have been discussed. Neither one, at least publicly, seems to have ended the debate. And whenever there is no single accepted explanation, the space gets filled by speculation. Another detail critics often bring up is the absence of the traditional easel announcement outside the hospital. Some people, that sounds like a small ceremonial matter. But to royal traditionalists, it is more than just a photo opportunity. It symbolizes an official public confirmation, part of a familiar process that many people associate with royal continuity. So when that step was skipped in Archie's case, some saw it as another example of the Sussexes doing things differently, while others treated it as one more reason to question whether standard procedures were followed. What happened next raised even more questions. Instead of fading, the discussion expanded when attention turned to Lilibet. If Archie's case had already made critics uneasy, Lilibet's birth introduced an even more unusual set of circumstances from a royal protocol point of view. She was born in California, far from the traditional structures people associate with royal births in the United Kingdom, and the announcement came through Harry and Meghan's own team rather than the palace's usual channels. To be fair, that alone does not suggest anything improper. Harry and Meghan were living in the United States by then, and the circumstances were obviously different from those surrounding previous senior royal births. Still, for people who think in terms of precedent and institutional process, the change in location and method of announcement added another layer to an already controversial story. No UK royal medical team was publicly linked to the event. That is not proof of wrongdoing. No familiar palace-style but it is exactly the kind of departure in the way some that royal watchers expected. Royal births are not viewed merely as private family events by everyone who follows the monarchy. They also have constitutional and symbolic implications. That is why critics focus so heavily on forms, wording, witnesses, and institutional involvement. In their view, missing steps matter. In the view of Harry and Meghan's defenders, those critics are turning ordinary privacy choices into conspiracy material. The public introduction of Lilibet added to that divide. Some saw it as a personal family reveal handled in a modern, media-savvy way. Others thought it looked more like a carefully managed announcement than a traditional royal update. That difference in tone may seem subtle, but in royal circles it matters more than outsiders sometimes realize. Tradition is not only about what is announced. It is also about how it is announced, who confirms it, and whether it enters the official record in a familiar way. This is why the wider conversation keeps circling back to the same point. The monarchy depends on documentation, routine, and continuity. Harry and Meghan built a public life that often emphasizes independence, privacy, and control over their own image. Those two approaches can clash. And when they do, even ordinary deviations from tradition can end up looking far more suspicious than they might otherwise appear. Part 3, as the story kept growing, another set of claims began drawing attention. The way Meghan appeared in certain pregnancy photos and public moments. Critics online started comparing images taken at different times and arguing that the overall appearance seemed inconsistent. They pointed to angles, clothing, posture, and the shape of her baby bump as reasons for doubt. Supporters, of course, dismissed much of that as intrusive armchair analysis of a woman's body. And from a neutral point of view, that is an important distinction. Visual speculation is not proof. It is interpretation, and often highly subjective interpretation at that. Still, the commentary did not stop there. Some people argued that the photos looked too staged or too controlled. Others said the images only deepened their suspicions because nothing about them felt spontaneous enough to settle the rumors. In the most dramatic versions of the story, critics claimed there had been a wider effort to conceal the truth. Those are serious allegations and they remain unproven. But once that language entered the conversation, the tone hardened even more. The attention also spread to the medical side of the story. Commentators began discussing the doctor reportedly associated with Lilibet's birth, noting that she stepped back from her practice not long after the birth took place. On its own, that could have any number of explanations, personal or professional, but within the already heated climate surrounding Harry and Meghan, critics treated it as yet another suspicious development. Some even connected the doctor's departure to unrelated speculation about fertility services through her family. Again, those connections are conjectural. They have been talked about, not established. This matters because royal protocol is usually described as relying on a clear chain of verification. Traditionally, people expect medical professionals, official notices, and formal records to leave little room for uncertainty. When that structure appears less visible than normal, critics move in quickly to fill the gap with theories. That does not mean those theories are correct. It does mean the absence of familiar public reassurance can become a story of its own. Then came another area of concern for palace watchers: Lilibet's christening. Reports say the ceremony was held privately in California and conducted by Bishop John Taylor of the Episcopal Church. Many people would view that as a perfectly meaningful family religious event. But royal traditionalists focused on a different issue entirely. They asked whether a private American ceremony outside the Church of England framework would carry the same institutional weight as a traditional royal christening in Britain. That is where the conversation moved from family choice into constitutional symbolism. The monarchy does not treat ceremonial records as mere sentiment. These events often become part of a long institutional archive. So if a christening happens outside the usual setting and without the standard type of Church of England record, Some advisors and commentators worry there may be a gap in the formal trail, not because the ceremony lacked personal meaning, but because the monarchy runs on precedent, registration, and continuity. And just when it seemed that birth records and christening details had already created enough debate, the photographs opened a whole new front. Holiday cards, family portraits, and public images of Archie and Lilibet